All right, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 11:30. Welcome everybody to this week's Zoom with Coach Joe Amplo. Let's start off with Scott Wyckoff.
Hey, Coach, what's your biggest takeaway as you return home from the game in Colgate and what you guys need to do to stop a pretty hot team from Lafayette?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Scott, I screwed our guys up last week. I think if you remember my message to this group and everything I said to our team, it was too focused on Colgate and what they do well and their chaos. And the reality is we didn't play confident. We played too concerned about making a mistake. And Colgate, they beat us. They whipped our butts because we just didn't play with a sense of confidence during that game. And we got to get past that. We have to focus on us and getting back to playing our freestyle lacrosse and confident and running the field and playing connected defense, which we just didn't do for 60 minutes against Colgate.
What is it like when you deal with a goaltender in a game like that for Dan, where there are a lot of goals scored, but he also makes some incredible saves right on the doorstep to keep him up and going with that aggressive play into a home game where he can get back in the groove?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's kind of frustrating actually, Scott, because I do believe his two best performances this year have been losses, against Penn State and against Colgate. Um, but I just think that adds to the sense of confidence. And if we can put this together with him playing the way he has and the really bright spots we've seen on our defense, but just not as consistently as we need, then I think we can put together some decent stuff here. But we've got to get both those things clicking at the same time. But certainly he gives us some encouragement because he played really well on Saturday.
And with Lafayette, what is it about their game that's put him on this role? I think they've won four in a row coming in.
Yeah, Pat's a really good coach. He's always been a great talent evaluator, and he's put some really good young pieces in place. Uh, they've always been a very buttoned up team. He's extremely detail oriented as a coach. And I've often said walking off the field against them is that's one of the better coach teams that I've seen. They do what they do and they do it well, and different than Colgate, where Colgate runs this kind of chaos that they do well. Lafayette is buttoned up. Now, they'll 10-man ride, but it just doesn't have the same feel. Not that they're not good at it, but just Colgate comes at you in waves and waves and waves. And Lafayette is extremely well coached in their details, and I think that's what makes them dangerous because if they do well, if they do what they do well against us, it's going to be a problem.
Thanks.
Owen.
Coach, you started by answering Scott's first question, looking inward. My first question for you would be this season. I mean, I know it's midway through, but where do you think that you've grown as a coach this year? Have you gotten a chance to reflect on that at all?
Not really. I try not to reflect too much, like from a really deep reflection until after the season. But each week, I try and evaluate how I did as a coach and how we did as a staff, and certainly the reflection point was obvious to me, probably in that fourth quarter against Colgate. When you look back and you say what happened, our players didn't execute. And what that means for us as a staff is we didn't allow them to execute with confidence. I believe that's the art of coaching, is making sure your kids are prepared in a way that the game can be free to them and they can play without fear of failure and play loose because they're so prepared. And we didn't do a good job of that, putting them in the right mental place. There was nothing that Colgate did schematically that we didn't prepare for, but it was just my messaging last week, which I think gave our guys a disadvantage. So I'm not afraid to say that, and that's something that I reflected upon, certainly last week.
Nice game for goers with two goals and an assist. And you talk about guys who are just ready for the moment, game in, game out. And what do you think's allowed him to be so consistent as a freshman?
Honestly, and I've said to other peers in my sport who are going through some of the lulls that we're going through, it's like misery loves company. So Sunday was my misery moments with my friends in the lacrosse world. And we all say the same thing. And the theme is kids who are naturally confident, they perform better. And Will is a naturally confident kid. He believes in himself. He's got this air of, dare I say, arrogance to him that I think great players need. They need that sense of confidence because there's nothing that he doesn't think he can do. And that's a hard thing to inject into young men, especially in pressure moments. But he brings that, and I think that's what's allowed him to kind of play above where his expectations really should be for this part of his career.
You're coming off back-to-back really sound home performances. I mean, that Hopkins game you mentioned was a very complete contest, albeit a loss, and then you respond with a win over Lemoyne. How do you keep that going, get another W against Lafayette? And what does just being home mean to your guys?
Well, it's a special week for us because it's senior week. That's really important for our guys, and they're starting to see that this journey is coming to an end. And hopefully, you playing your best lacrosse in April, and your seniors are the ones pushing that. Whether they're leading from the front on game day or pushing through the week in practice, they all have a vital role in this. And I really appreciate this senior class and what they've been able to do with this program. Now's the time that they've got to be at their best. And playing back at Navy Marine Corps Memorial Stadium is always special. Coming back on a Friday night, I think is what all of our guys would want to do. Friday night lacrosse and at Navy is a fun place to be. It's a great environment, and our guys appreciate that. So we can't focus on all that superficial stuff. We've got to just focus on getting better this week and make sure we're really prepared for a really dangerous Lafayette team.
Thank you.
Wags.
Well, Joe, you've mentioned several times the word chaos is related to Colgate. What exactly do they do? Or is it just constant defensive pressure on the ball at all times? Or what exactly are you referring to?
Yeah, constant 10-man ride, and they are fully committed to it, where there's a lot of teams that do 10-man, and we're one of them, and the back end is a little bit loose. So, you've got an outlet deep if you can find them. So you're playing a little bit less of a calculated risk with that scenario, where Colgate, it doesn't matter. If you want to bring the goalie over the midline because he's man to man, you're bringing the goalie over the midline. They are all in on the 10-man, and they're very aggressive once they get to the top of the box. They've also got some really good pieces in it. They've got good players in the middle of the field that can make some plays. That's number one. Number two, defensively, they double team every time you dodge. Whether you sweep or go down the alley, they're going to double you. It wasn't so much their defensive chaos that hurt us. It was more the riding and then their pace of play on offense. They want to score within the first 10 to 15 seconds. They will dodge when we're subbing. They scored a goal when it was 3-on-4. They scored 2 goals off the face-off, off a ground ball play in the box. They're just really good at that type of stuff. And I was lucky that there was a media timeout with a little bit under 5 minutes in the first quarter, because the first 10 minutes of that game felt like it took an hour with how much up and down it went. It was possession after possession, ride, clear, fail, clear, ride, clear, offense, defense for both ways. And I looked up at the clock and there was only 10 minutes gone by. That's just the way their game is played with them, because they bring so much chaotic pressure all over the field.
So when you look at the stats, obviously they outshoot you 53-34 with 33 shots on goal as opposed to your 16. But do you think ultimately the key stats are 20 turnovers and 16 for 25 clearing?
I think that allowed them to play more confident, truthfully, Wags. And our failed clears early put us in a place of always feeling like we were trying to catch up. And then when we couldn't get the ball off the face-off because our wing play was terrible. They did a great job on the wings, where Colin gave us a chance, but our wing play was atrocious. So we never felt like we can stack possessions together comfortably. So clearing was a big part of it. Also early on in the first 8 minutes of the game, we had 3 great looks at the cage and we don't score one of them. If we score one of them, then there's a sense of calmness that comes with that. Not that is the answer to winning, but that certainly helps us get to a place of comfort earlier in the game, which we could just never get to until sometime in the late second quarter.
So looking ahead to Lafayette, I mean, this is a critical game. I mean, as you mentioned, you got to get back on track and win a Patriot League game to stay in the race, stay at the top tier of the standings. Can you just talk about how critical this game is on Friday night?
Well, it's a critical one because it's the next one, and we got to continue to improve. And that's the biggest challenge this week is how can we play better and look like the team we were a few weeks ago, and get closer to that and surpass it as April is now here. We don't talk about the results of where does this put us in the Patriot League. We just focus on how does Navy play better this week, and the next opponent is Lafayette. But really, the true opponent this week is us. We've got to improve and play at our best down the stretch here in order to make a run at this thing.
Scott.
Coach, every senior class has its own personality. What has been the personality of this class, and what you're going to take away from them as you continue through the season now in this run?
I would say just a consistent discipline and buy-in to our process, and they believe in what we're teaching here. They believe in the core values of our program, which are bold, accountable, together with love. They live their lives like that. They're not afraid to put themselves in position of vulnerability. That's boldness. They're not afraid to hold each other to the standard. That's our accountability. They have the team in mind. I mean, we've got a bunch of kids who don't play that much as seniors, but they are the hardest workers. They are sometimes our loudest voices, and they are pushing the standard. And what I see is just this uncharacteristic love for one another, which I think you often see on good teams, but here it's a little bit different. These kids do so much together and for each other. To me, those are signs of great teams. The results may not say that as much as we'd like right now, but I see those characteristics. And of any group we've had here, this group has really taken ownership of that and truly wants to leave that as their legacy, that those are the pillars that are going to hold up this program for years to come.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Scott Strassmeyer.
Wow.
I was Joe, I was gonna ask you about Chet announcing his retirement yesterday. I still remember me, you, him, and Stacy at the yacht club when you were here for your interview for a lunch on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah.
I guess tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Chet and his career here, and obviously he hiring you.
Well, you made me the most nervous at that lunch. That's for sure. But I mean, look, I think a lot of people kind of knew that this was coming at some point. I joked with him yesterday. I said, "You promised me you were going to be here forever," and I truly wish he could be. I mean, he's been an unbelievable boss and a friend. He has supported me personally, professionally, in a way that, quite honestly, nobody else thought that he could. And I don't mean that. I want to explain how I mean that. Like, there was so much leading up to this job and the position that Navy lacrosse was in and deserves to be in. And there was a lot of pressure for whoever it was to accept this position. And I have been nothing but graced with an unbelievable level of support from a dear friend and a true professional in our business in Chet Gladchuk. I mean, from day one, he has been so supportive and patient, quite frankly. In some ways, I feel like I've let him down because I haven't gotten this thing to where it needs to be just yet, and he's been really patient and kind and supportive and has seen the growth in this program, and believes in where we are now and where it's going to be in the future. So, just like Ed last week was a great friend, Chet even more, he's not my boss. He's a mentor. He's a guy I go to, and we've had some really tough conversations with a lot of things, but he has set this program up for success for generations. And I'm sure he's done that for every other program here on the yard. So, I'm curious to see what's next, but I don't want to rush that because, I want to keep him here for as long as we can. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Joe, how do you approach Lafayette? They have one of the most potent scorers in the country, in Riley Sullivan. Their goalkeepers in the upper half of the country, and their face-off kid has done a really nice job, and I think was pretty instrumental in helping Lafayette maintain possession last week against Bucknell, who again is one of the highest scoring teams in the country. So you've got a lot of guys to really focus on.
Yeah, I mean, they're a complete team. They've got good pieces in the right spots. Riley Sullivan, I'm really impressed with how that kid has developed and come along and how confident he's playing. And he's extremely balanced. 60 points is nothing to joke at, and he's balanced with 25 and 35. And I tell you, there are other guys they're good at what they do. The 34 is as good as a lefty as we've seen. 14, excellent. The other guys do a great job. So they're really balanced. We've got to just make sure we are true to who we are. That's how we've got to approach it. We got to challenge our guys to do their individual jobs really well, but as a team, we have to be at our best because this is going to be a dogfight. At the face-off X, Colin's going to have his hands full in that unit. And their goalie he's very, very good. It's scary. We just said it in our staff meeting. He's the best goalie we've seen in probably a month at least. So at least going into this one. So I'm glad we're home. I'm glad there's a little bit of anger on our team and frustration. I think that brings out the best in us. But there's no assumptions here. We got to make sure we get after this thing each day and play our best on Friday night.
Tim.
Yeah, Coach, in a couple games in Justin's absence, who of the shorties have really impressed you and have stepped up?
Yeah, I mean, Justin is it's a shame with him out, and Josh Nagy went down last week with an injury. So we're a little bit depleted at that position. Jack Norton and Chad Connolly have done an unbelievable job all year long. They really have. Chad especially has risen his game up. We've always known Jack Norton was excellent. But now you're starting to see the likes of Chase Green, a kid from McDonough who's a freshman who we really liked coming out of high school. Charlie Brady, a senior who has paid his dues. When we talk about this senior class, he's everything that this senior class is about. He's been the hardest worker, the most liked guy on the team for years. And now he's going to get his shot to perform, and I think you're going to start to see maybe guys like JT Thomas and Ryan Trafford, who was at the face-off X for a couple of games, come back to the defensive side to give us a little bit more depth until we get a couple of those other guys healthy.
You've had a number of every program deals with this, but you've had a number of injuries at key positions this season, especially after you got off to such a hot start. How much confidence does that give you going forward? Just seeing the way these guys have responded to such.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know if we've responded so well the past 2 weeks, but I think that's part of seasons. I don't want to make an excuse that injuries make an impact. They certainly do, but every team deals with it one way or another. We've been hit with some major ones in, the bad timing, but we've got to perform and figure out our way with those ingredients or those things that come our way and deal with it. I do think it took us a while to kind of figure out who we kind of needed to be once some of these injuries happened. We were playing a certain style and a certain pace and a certain way, and then you have to readjust drastically because of certain things that just you can't predict. So it's taken us a little while to come out of that. And last week was not a great sign of it, but I do think we can rebound and find the way that we need to play and perform at our best moving forward.
Thank you.
Wags?
Last week you talked about Will Goers a little bit, and based on his high school production, I think he was a second midfielder at St. Mary's as a senior. I mean, he didn't even make the Capital Gazette All-County, not first or second team. And normally that doesn't speak Division I prospect. And I'll be honest, I was one of those who said, "Oh, this is Joe Amplo doing a favor for Mark Goers to help his kid get an education at the Naval Academy." What did you see in Will Goers that other schools didn't?
I've watched that kid kind of grow up for the last 6 years, and I've never seen a kid love lacrosse more. I've watched him play box lacrosse. I've watched him at camp. I've always seen a confident kid and a skilled kid. He had unbelievable lacrosse skill and lacrosse IQ. And those are things you can't really see. The lacrosse IQ part, you cannot see that so much in recruiting. You've got to really have a good eye for it and sometimes get lucky. but I witnessed a lacrosse IQ that was elite, and I saw it consistently. And the thing that sold me on him was his love for the game. Everything in his life, lacrosse is the most important thing, and everything else in his life goes around that. To me, that's a characteristic or an ingredient you need for greatness. And I just felt like if this kid chose to go to naps, put on some weight, he was going to be a guy that was going to surprise some people. I didn't think he would be this impactful early. I thought maybe it would take him into his sophomore or junior year, but he has surprised all of us. There's no favors here, Wags. If I'm in the business of giving out favors, then I'm going to be out of a job pretty soon. So kids have to earn their way, and we have to see something in them. Certainly, the window was opened up because of Mark and I's relationship, and I think that allowed me to see what I just described. But this was no favor because Chet hired me for a reason, and he never said, "Hey, you need to do some favors for some people along the way." That would be not the right way to do things around here.
So, I mean, even as coaches at St. Mary's are marvel at the transformation. I mean, this is a kid who, but from the time he left St. Mary's a senior till the time he showed up on the field this spring is just dramatically changed everything. He's bigger, stronger, more confident. I mean, have you ever seen a player who's going to the prep school it helped more?
I mean, Jack Ponzio is doing a pretty good job, and he was kind of overlooked at St. Anthony's too. Not as much as Will Goers. Jack Ponzio is a pretty impactful freshman who went to the prep school. So I would put those guys in the same regard. Now Ponzio was recruited by some more people at our level. Will certainly wasn't, but in terms of impact from the prep school, you can argue that those two guys are having as big of an impact of anybody on our team, and they both came from the same pipeline. So, but Will, I think, again, it's just a testament to hard work and love for the game. And I think anybody out there, any high school kid who's looking at us should look at him and say, there's a chance as long as I commit to this, but also going back to what we talked about with Chet, this doesn't happen to Will Goers without Chet's support. And I mean that in such a strong way that Tim Murray is our strength coach. He's the best in the business. Will Goers does not look the way he looks without Tim Murray and Bailey Goggin, who's our dietitian. Those two have just invested in our kids, and he doesn't put on 20 pounds of muscle without those two impacting his life. It just doesn't happen. And that stuff goes so unnoticed. And there's such elite professionals that Chet has surrounded us with and given us the resources to help build and shape a young man like Will Goers. Because I've said it to you, I'll say it again, this program is built on player development. Player recruitment is extremely important, but we have to develop our players at a faster rate than our peers. And Will's an example of that. There's another kid somewhere, hopefully soon, that people overlooked that everyone in the lacrosse world is going to go, wow. But for us, it's not a surprise because that's what we do here. That's what we're starting to be able to do with the resources. And now the time that our staff has been here to figure this thing out, we're starting to see the fruits of that labor, and it's a beautiful thing to see when you get young guys who are playing like upperclassmen because of the work that some individuals have put in with them.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate it. Thanks,
All right,
everybody,
thanks,
for your
guys.
time.
Have a great week.
You
Thanks,
as
Joe.
well.